Let's talk about the part of breaking into cybersecurity that seems to confuse almost everyone at the beginning, and that's certifications. Because if you're trying to get into cyber in 2026, you have probably asked this question: which certification should I take first? And I get it. There are so many options out there right now. You have A+, Network+, Security+, CYSA+, Google Cybersecurity, ISC2CC, Microsoft, GRC, ethical hacking, cloud certifications. The list goes on. It feels like every week there is another person online saying, take this cert and you'll get hired. But here is the recruiter side truth. Certifications can absolutely help you, but they are not the whole career plan. And if you treat them like a magic key, you can waste a lot of time and money. Hey everyone, I'm Luke Gough. I'm a cybersecurity recruiter and career coach, and welcome to Cyber Careers podcast. And I help people understand how to break into cybersecurity without wasting months going down the wrong path. Today we're talking about one of the biggest questions beginners ask me. What certification should you actually take if you're trying to break into cybersecurity? Because this is where a lot of people go wrong. They choose a certification before they have chosen a direction. They buy a course before they understand the role, or they collect certificates without building any real evidence that they can actually do the work. So in this podcast, I want to give you the recruiter side answer, not the perfect academic answer, not the answer that says every certification is useful in its own way. I want to answer the question practically. If you're trying to break into cybersecurity, which certification should you take first? What order should you think about them in? And when should you specialize? The way I want to think about this is very simple. Foundations first, specialization second, proof all the way through. That means basic IT if you need it, networking properly, then Security Plus as the first proper cyber certification for most people. And only then a role-specific cert, depending on whether you're heading down SOC or GRC, cloud, IAM or offensive security. So let's break that down. First of all, let's talk about the big certification mistake. The biggest mistake, or one of the biggest mistakes I see, is people collecting certifications without a clear direction. They think, if I get one more badge, one more cert, one more course completion, then maybe employers will finally take me seriously. But from the hiring side, that is not really how it works. A certification tells me you studied a body of knowledge and passed an exam. And don't get me wrong, that's useful. It gives recruiters and hiring managers a signal. But it doesn't automatically prove you can do the job. So for an entry-level candidate, I'm usually looking for three things. Do they understand the fundamentals? Do they have practical evidence? And do they look aligned to the role that they're actually applying for? A cert can help with the first one. It can support the third one, but it rarely solves the second one by itself. So the mindset I want you to take is this. Do not collect certifications and hope they replace evidence. I want you to use certifications to structure your learning and validate the skills you are already building. So let's talk about the simple certification order. If I was starting from scratch, I'd think about certifications in layers. Layer 1 is basic IT. Layer 2 is networking. Layer 3 is your first proper cyber certification. Layer 4 is your role-specific certification. That is the order because cyber sits on top of IT and networking. If the foundation is weak, everything else is harder. So should you take CompTIA A+? Let's start with this. Now, A+ can be useful if you are completely new to IT. I'm talking you don't really understand hardware, operating systems, troubleshooting, devices, users, permissions, or even just basic support tasks. If that's the case, then A+ gives you a structured introduction. It can also help you if your plan is to get into an IT support role first. And for a lot of people, that is still a sensible route into cyber. So before I continue, I'm not saying everyone you should get A+, but I'm simply saying that if you're completely fresh to IT, completely new to it, this could be a good option for you because it will give you the basics. Now, you might start in help desk, service desk, desktop support, or junior system support. Build real technical experience and then move towards security. But I would not present A+ as mandatory for everyone, like I said. If you already understand basic computers, operating systems and troubleshooting, I would not automatically spend money on the exam. I would probably skip that one, to be honest. I would still learn the material if there are gaps. So my advice would be learn the A+ material if you are new to IT. Take the exam if it helps you get that first IT support role, but do not treat it as a compulsory cyber certification. Now, let's talk about CompTIA Network Plus. This is different. This is the one I care about more, because if there is one area beginners underestimate, it's networking. Cybersecurity is built on the foundations of networking. And I know networking doesn't always sound exciting when you're new. People want to get straight to threat hunting or ethical hacking, cloud security, etc. But every cyber role touches networks in some way. SOC analysts need to understand logs, ports, protocols, DNS, firewalls. Cloud security people need to understand how cloud networks are designed. GRC analysts still need enough technical understanding to assess controls and risks properly. IAM analysts need to understand authentication, access, identity flows, and how systems talk to each other. So would I study Network Plus? Yes, absolutely. Would I sit the exam? That depends. If you have no IT background and you can afford it, I would strongly consider it. If money is tight, study the Network Plus material properly and decide later whether the exam is worth it. But the knowledge is non-negotiable. This is the plumbing, if you like, of cybersecurity. You can delay the exam if you need to, but you cannot skip the knowledge. Okay, that brings us to CompTIA Security Plus. Now, this I would call your first proper cyber certification. After that, not because Security Plus is perfect, not because it guarantees a job, and definitely not because it replaces practical experience, but because it is widely recognized. It's vendor neutral and broad enough to give you a solid grounding across the field. As a recruiter, I can tell you, in my opinion, it's still the gold standard in entry-level cybersecurity certifications. And I talk about that a lot, but it really is true. Security Plus introduces you to threats and vulnerabilities, security architecture, identity and access management, risk, incident response, governance, compliance, and cloud environments. That breadth is so useful. It helps you understand the language of cybersecurity. It gives hiring managers a familiar signal. And for a beginner, it can help you work out which parts of cybersecurity you are actually interested in. So if someone asks me, Luke, I can only afford one cyber cert right now, which one should I take? For most beginners, my answer is still Security Plus. But there is a huge warning here. Security Plus cannot be the whole plan. It's important you understand that Security Plus with no projects, no networking knowledge, no role direction, or no practical evidence is not especially strong. Now, having said that, Security Plus with a small lab, a few documented projects, the targeted resume, and a clear role direction is much stronger. So the certification is the signal, the projects are the proof. So what about the Google Cybersecurity Certificate and the ISC2? Well, these can be useful, but I would not usually put them above Security Plus from a recruiter recognition perspective. The Google Cybersecurity is a good beginner-friendly learning path. It absolutely gives you structure and it can help if you're starting from zero. But I would see it as more of a learning pathway than a strong hiring signal. Now, the ISC2 can also be a good introduction, especially if it's free or low cost. But again, I would not collect it just because it exists. Simple version, Google Cyber Certificate and the ISC2 can help you start. Security Plus is usually the stronger, first recognized cyber certification. And Network Plus is often the missing foundation that makes Security Plus easier to understand. So do not choose the second certification randomly. After you finish Security Plus, this is where people need to stop copying random certification roadmaps from the internet. The next certification should depend on the role you actually want. Now, at first, you may not know that, and that's fine. Do an internship, do research, speak to people in the field, do your Security Plus. You don't necessarily need to know what path you're going down until you're at that point. Now, cybersecurity is not one job. A SOC analyst, a GRC analyst, a cloud security analyst, all of these different roles, pen testers, they all do not need the same evidence. So after Security Plus, choose based on your target path. So let's talk about that a bit. Maybe you want SOC or security operations. So if you're going down this route, the CYSA Plus is a sensible option, along with the CCDL1 by CyberDefenders, which has excellent investigation labs in there. You've got BTL1 or Blue Team Level 1 is also worth looking at if you want something more practical and Blue Team focused. Then, depending on your target jobs, tool-specific certs may help. If Splunk appears again and again, then a Splunk certification may be useful. If Microsoft Sentinel and Defender appear a lot, then Microsoft SC200 may make sense. But do not jump into tool certifications too early. First, understand detection and response, then use tool certifications to match your target market. And whatever you do, pair the certifications with a portfolio, with labs. Read logs, write investigation notes, build a small SIEM lab. Use platforms like TryHackMe, Let's Defend, CyberDefenders. The SOC certification plus practical investigation evidence is much stronger than just a certification alone. Okay, let's move on to GRC. So if GRC is the path, then this is different. You do not need to pretend you want to be a pen tester. GRC is all about risk controls, frameworks, policies, audits, compliance, and a big part of it is stakeholder communication. You need to be able to liaise with people in the business who don't understand technical jargon. Security Plus still helps because it gives you technical grounding. But after that, I would look at ISO 27001 Foundation or the ISC2 SSCP, depending on what roles you are seeing. I would not rush into CISSP as a brand new beginner. CISSP is highly respected, but it's not an entry-level certification. It's what you do further down the line. And I do get asked that question, so I wanted to bring it up. For GRC, practical evidence matters too. I would create a sample risk register, for example, write a basic security policy, map a fictional business against the essential 8, create an audit checklist, because that kind of evidence can be really powerful. Most beginners don't do it. If you want cloud security, once again, different pathway. Start with cloud literacy. Learn one major cloud platform properly. Now that might be Azure, AWS, or GCP. A first step would be AZ 900 for Azure or AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner for AWS. These are not really cyber certifications, they're more cloud fundamental certifications, but that is the exact point. You need to understand cloud basics before you can secure cloud environments. Now after that, if cloud security is genuinely your target, you can look at AZ 500 or even the AWS security specialty later. But build small cloud projects as well. Set up IAM users and roles, configure MFAs, review security groups, etc. Document what you built. That makes the certifications far more believable. Now, if you want identity access management, IAM, this is one of the most overlooked pathways for beginners. It's not always marketed as the glamorous cyber role, but identity is at the center of modern security. So maybe you're interested in IAM. Start with the foundations, networking knowledge, and Security Plus. Then look at Microsoft Identity. I would definitely consider the SC900. This can be a useful starting point because it covers Microsoft security, compliance, and identity fundamentals. Now, the SC300 goes deeper into identity and access administration, so that's also the one you can look at after. Now, if Okta appears in a lot of your target roles, then Okta certifications may be useful later, but again, pair it with proof. Show that you understand MFA, conditional access, groups, permissions. Show this first, then you can go down that route. Now, IAM can be a brilliant path to take, but you need to show that you understand identity as a real business security problem, not just another badge. So let's talk about ethical hacking or pen testing. I understand why beginners are drawn to it because it really does sound exciting, but I'd be really careful starting here. Pen testing is not usually the easiest entry point because you need strong fundamentals across networking, operating systems, web applications, scripting, and security concepts. Now, if you skip the basics, you will struggle. I've seen it as a recruiter. I've seen hiring managers talk about this. Would I make CEH my first choice as a beginner? Personally, no. It appears in sub-job ads and it has recognition, but recognition does not always mean it's the best learning path. I'd rather see someone build practical skills through labs, then consider EJBT or PNPT when ready for hands-on assessments. Now, the OSCP is highly respected, but it is not where I would start from absolute zero. It is a more complicated certification. I do consider that if you do go down that pen testing route, absolutely look at getting this. It really is an excellent certification, but not at first. So if offensive security is your goal, I would still start with networking, Linux Security Plus, hands-on labs, then maybe the EJPT or the PNPT later, and definitely consider the OSCP further down the track. So let's talk about certifications I would not rush into. I would not rush into the CISSP as a complete beginner. Now, many of you listening to this will probably be like, Luke, that's obvious. But I'm saying this because I get asked this question a lot. It is a well-respected certification, but it's not a beginner certification. I'd also not rush into the OSCP, like I said before, without that technical foundation first. I would not collect lots of small badges and expect them to transform your resume. I would not pay for an expensive bootcamp just because it includes a certification at the end. And I definitely would not choose a certification purely because someone online said it got them hired. Your background matters, your target role matters, your market matters. So always bring it back to evidence. What roles are you targeting? What do those roles ask for? What skills can you prove? And what certification supports that story? Remember, have a look online, look at job spec, look at job ads, see what people are asking for. So if I had to make this really simple, here is the certification roadmap I would give most beginners. Learn the A+ material if you need basic IT foundations, as in you've come in from no experience whatsoever. Study Network Plus properly because networking is non-negotiable, and try and do the exam if you can. Now take Security Plus as your first proper cyber certifications in most cases. Then choose your next certification based on the role you actually want. CYSA Plus or CCDL1 for SOC, ISO 27001 for GRC, the AZ900 or AWS Cloud Practitioner for cloud security, the S900, the SC900 and the SC300 for IAM, and practical labs before EJPT or the PNPT for offensive security, and down the line, look at the OSCP. But remember, the bigger point, the certification is not the career plan. The certification supports the career plan. So do not just ask, what certification should I take? Ask, what role am I aiming for? What skills do I need to prove? And which certification helps me tell that story more clearly? That is how you make certifications work for you instead of letting them become another expensive distraction. I hope you found this useful. Let me know what you thought, and also fill out the form below if you have any questions you want me to cover in future Cyber Careers episodes. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep up your career.